In the previous video, we discussed the benefits of low intensity steady state cardio, or LISS. In this video, I want to hit on high intensity interval training, or HIIT, and that can be interval training style or just higher intensity exercise in general, because there's different methodologies involved in the higher intensity workouts, whereas doing the longer steady state, lower intensity with your heart rate lower is going to be using more fat for fuel. Doing the higher intensity exercise will be using more carbs for fuel. So it's very important to understand that you should manipulate your carbs slightly if you're trying to get the most out of it. Now, it really just depends on why you're doing your HIIT training. If you are training for something in particular for performance purposes, it is very important you bump up those carbs prior to that HIIT training session and possibly after. But if you are doing it for weight loss purposes, it's finding that good balance between really focusing on your protein and your healthy fat and your fiber. And then if you are going to be doing those really intense workouts, supplying your body with a little bit more higher carbs. Now, also to go hand in hand with that, if you are really craving some carbs and you know it's not the best for blood sugar, then it would be ideal to consume those carbs around that time. So on that very day that you're doing the HIIT training, if not followed very close after. So high intensity interval training in itself is going between high intensity and low intensity. So for me, my ideal HIIT training session is going to be on a treadmill, and I basically get on there, I do a couple minutes of a warm-up, and then I crank it up to a run. So I start where I'm comfortable, because we don't need to go from 0 to 100 right away. That's a very easy way of getting injured. So typically I'll walk for a few minutes, I'll bump it up to about 6.5 miles per hour, and that's a nice little jog run for me. And then after a minute or so, I'll crank it up to 8, and then I do it for about a minute, and then I grab a hold of the handles, I jump off, straddle, and then I hop completely off and I jog in place for 30 seconds. Then I crank it up before I get on the treadmill. I crank it up to 9.5, and then I get on there, straddle it, get my bearings, hold on to the handles, and then I start my legs first, and then when I feel like I've got my core tight and I'm ready and I brace myself, then I start running, and then I let go, and then I sprint for 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds when I'm going slower for my fastest pace. And again, this is all going to be relative to what you are capable of doing. So your fastest pace might be 6 miles per hour, and that's fantastic. So you need to just slowly progress up, and then I do that for 30 seconds. I keep bumping it up by 0.5 miles per hour each and every time, and then I get on there, and typically my max is about 11.5. I think maybe one time I got up to 12, and that was for 20 to 30 seconds, okay? So if you are doing this progressive bump up and then you might bump it down, I suggest one time per week, no more than twice per week. If the bulk of your session is going to be 15 to 20 minutes, then I would say 1 to 2 times per week is going to be the sweet spot for where you're going to reap the benefits for cardiovascular health, metabolic health. You're going to be really, helping with your blood sugar levels, so insulin sensitivity improvement, and just overall wellness. It's not going to be detrimental to your hormones, okay? Because remember, when we're stressing out our body, cortisol goes up. So whether you're doing really long distance and you're doing 20 miles of a slow run, at some point in that run, it's going to shift from low intensity to, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for a long time, so now it's more intense because my heart rate has slowly crept up. I'm really tired, I'm really fatigued, so then cortisol is going to bump up. Same thing with HIIT. You get to that fatigue much quicker because you're going at a more intense pace. So if you're doing that too often throughout the week, it's going to be detrimental to cortisol, which is not our goal. So I would say you can sprinkle it in 1 to 2 times a week if you're doing that bulk session where it's anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes from start to finish. even with a few minutes of a warm up and cool down. And then if you are trying to really do it right, and there's a lot of studies now backing up the research for females 40 and up, because before, all the information we had on HIIT training was really on men and women of college years who were thriving hormonally, who were not as susceptible to cortisol issues and hormonal issues outside of that. So now once we've hit 40 and up, we have a few different obstacles that we are trying to navigate through, and it's just because of where we're at hormonally and what we've been through in life. So we want to play it as safe as possible and really execute it in a way that's going to be beneficial in the overall picture of things. So if you want to get the most out of it, sprinkling in a few times throughout the week, doing 5 minutes of HIIT at the end of your workout is going to be really powerful. So all you need is about 3 to 4, no more than 5 cycles of that intense bout of 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, whether you're doing high knees at home and you're going as fast as you can, and then you do this in place for 30 seconds. And you have your timer set up, and then it dings, and then you're going fast paced as quick as you can. And then if you're doing that, you can do it every single day, and you can reap the benefits. And ideally, you would do it that way instead of having one delegated day, one delegated session to that, because it's going to be just enough to boost your metabolism. It's going to be just enough to get all the bang for your buck and no negatives to it. And there's a lot of research supporting these short bursts as opposed to the long session. So hopefully that was helpful. The last point I want to make is in terms of the order in which you do it. I highly suggest prioritizing your weights. If you are not training for a half marathon, you're not training for a full marathon, you're not training for an Ironman, if you're not training for something specifically in the aerobic cardiovascular realm, then us females need to always have the most oomph in us for the resistance training, because we're going to get the most out of that if we're able to give the most, push the most weight. So we want to make sure that we're not blowing through our glycogen stores doing HIIT prior to weights, and then when we get to the weights we can only lift half as much, or even just a little bit less than what we're used to. So you want to put that at the tail end. That way whatever's left in you, you give your all, and then you call it a day. So hopefully that was helpful. See you in the next video.